CMPRadio.net, the voice of Chester.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining in yet again to WWJD special interview segments. Of course, as promised, we have our next representative for Congress. You're running for Congress, U.S. Congress, hopefully. Dave Galluch. Did I get it right?
You got it, man. You nailed it.
Yes,
Nice.
thank you. Dave, one thing that WWJD does every week, we pick a word of the week. I'm very big on education and putting that stuff out there. And this week word was relentless. The definition of relentless is oppressively constant, incessant. Just hearing the word relentless, what does it mean to you?
What does relentless mean to me? It means laser focused on the things that you care about, the things that you value, and willing to overcome any obstacle and to do whatever it takes to achieve what you think needs to be done or what you want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to take this time to not just give you your flowers, but also thank you so much for your service.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
When I think about relentless, and I know that you have served, you have demonstrated countless of times being relentless.
Yeah.
And I read some of your bio. You were hung out with some of the elite teams, SEAL Team 5, and working with IEDs. These are dangerous jobs. So thank you for putting your life on the line and fighting for us in a battle that only a few of us have chosen to do in our life.
I appreciate that, man. And yeah, relentless definitely applies to that. When you're in a high stress environment, high stakes environment, literally lives on the line, you have to be relentless in how you pursue working together as a team. And that's, I think, the number one thing I learned in the military is the importance of teamwork and subordinating oftentimes, your own preferences for what we need to do to get the mission done. And,
absolutely.
And I'm sure we'll dive into it, but that's a very formative thing for me when I think about what we're missing in Washington, what we're missing in government is the ability to put the mission first, and the mission first is taking care of this country.
Absolutely. So just getting right into it. First question, who is Dave Galluch? Who is this guy?
Who is Dave Galluch? All right, so just a little background on me. So I was born, I was actually born in Buffalo, New York, and I was raised in upstate New York outside of Buffalo. I come from a single-parent family. My dad was killed by a drunk driver in a car accident before I was born. And my mom actually found out that she was pregnant with me the day of his wake, believe it or not, which, I mean, that it's like something out of a movie, right?
Has she ever told you that you act just like him?
All the time. I dance just like him too, which is not very good, I guess. But she told me I dance just like him too. But so I was raised by a single mom. I
Shout out to mom.
Moms are
phenomenal,
the bedrock of everything. Let's be honest. The future success of the kid is always the work of the mom. Let's be honest. But that's central to my worldview, man. Is family, right? My family stepped up to help my mom take care of me. My dad was one of 7. My mom was one of 4. And my aunts and uncles were always present in my life. So the old adage, it takes a village, is 100% true in my case.
Who was the crazy uncle?
The crazy uncle.
Who was the uncle that let Dave do whatever he wanted?
Yeah, that's probably my Uncle John. Yeah.
Shout out to Uncle John.
Thanks,
we love
thanks,
the crazy
Uncle John.
uncles.
Yeah. He's.
I have an Uncle John.
He's
Austin.
crazy in a
That's
good
my
way.
crazy uncle.
Yeah, he's crazy in a good way, man. So anyways, I come from a military family. We have a lot of family in the military, going all the way back to like the Revolution. So we had people that crossed the Delaware River with George Washington.
Wow.
People who fought in every major war the country's ever fought.
So you've been putting those creases in the corner of your bed for a long time.
Oh my gosh. My mom is a clean freak, so I tell you right now, I know how to make those hospital corners on a bed. I went into the military and I knew exactly what I was doing as soon as I got there, man.
I got this, Sarge.
Exactly. But my uncle, her brother, went to the Naval Academy, and I just fell in love with the Naval Academy, the history, the tradition, the leadership laboratory it is of teaching you how to become a person of strong moral values and putting the country first. So to me, I just I was lucky enough to get accepted to the Naval Academy, and it was kind of funny. My mom cried her eyes out the day she dropped me off at the Naval Academy.
Wow, I bet.
As you can imagine.
Yeah.
Cried her eyes out, and I remember all the seniors were yelling at the parents, "Mom and Dad, say goodbye to your kids. They're ours now." They're like taunting the parents. And my mom is there like pointing back and screaming at them, like, "Leave my son alone," all this stuff. I'm like, "Mom, calm down. You're really going to get me in trouble here."
Yeah,
like,
I'm going to have to do PT all night after this.
Yeah. You're just going to make it worse for me, I promise. So, but by the time I was in my 3rd year at the Naval Academy, she kind of got okay with the fact that I was going to be in the Navy, and she kind of thought I was going to be on a ship, which at the time of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were at their height, was the safest place for me. But I broke her heart, and I told her, "Hey, look, Mom, I actually signed up to defuse bombs."
Yeah.
So she cried her eyes out like crazy. But Navy EOD is a special operations community. It's very small. It's actually about half the size of the SEALs. So we're the other special operations community in the Navy.
Wow, awesome.
And so I was blessed and lucky to get selected for it. Pretty rigorous selection process, a lot of physical stuff. I ended up making two deployments, one to the Middle East, one to Somalia with, like you said, SEAL Team 4. And seeing the best of this country, working with people, who didn't look like me, didn't believe the same things as me, but, we got the mission done, and more importantly, we brought everyone home alive while getting the mission done. And I don't care what else I do in my life, what else I achieve in my life, that will be the crowning achievement of my life.
I can only imagine. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, thank you so much for your service.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And before it started, we were talking about it, and you had mentioned how, it's so many, you were so humble about it. He was like, no, it's different ways to serve, being a teacher, being a community activist. But I wanted to remind you that very few of us, actually put our lives on the line, our blood, our sweat, our tears, families, your mom crying and stressing probably, are you okay?
To say the least, man.
And you're going months probably without being able to talk to her and stuff like that. So thank you again so much for your service.
I appreciate
your time.
That. Thank you.
And I'm the tears, the push-ups, the PT, all the leadership that you had to demonstrate in being a part of such an elite team. So I just don't want that to go unnoticed.
The jumps out of an airplane were always probably the hardest for me. Leaving the Navy, I was glad that I wasn't going to have to jump out of a plane anymore. Because you do it like 100 times, it's not as cool as it was the first time. The first time, it's like a novelty experience. The second time, it's pretty cool. 10th time, 11th time, 90th time, you're like, okay, I think I'm good. Yeah.
No more jumping. What type of kid were you growing up?
What kind of kid was I growing up? Well, obviously I was really close to my mom, really close to my her parents who lived like 5 minutes away. But I think, I had a lot of interests. I wouldn't call myself, I wasn't a bad kid. I was a energetic kid, always running around the neighborhood, playing backyard sports, basketball, street hockey, football, baseball. Really, really loved playing sports, played sports growing up. And I love school. I did love school. I love to read. I still read. That's kind of where I kind of get some solace. Reading and working out are kind of my breaks from the campaign trail. My mom tells me that I was an easy kid to raise, so I at least did her that favor.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Who were some of the most influential people in your life growing up?
My grandfather, so obviously besides my mom, her dad, my grandfather, was like my father figure to me, and he was definitely, my number one mentor. So he was a drug and alcohol counselor and social worker in a local high school, and he was really well respected in the community because in that day. We don't live in the country we lived in. There were prejudices. There were a lot of, negative views. My grandfather didn't care, and he would go into any community, work with any community, embed himself with any family. And for that reason, he was really well respected in the community, a man of really deep faith, really deep morals. And he taught me a lot about what it means to serve, what it means to lead, and, how to be a good person. And he's my hero. He passed away, unfortunately, in June of 2020. He had some health complications that he had been battling for a while, but losing him.
Sorry to hear that.
Losing him was really tough, but we had the kind of relationship to where I don't have any regrets of things I shouldn't have said, things I should have said. I can tell you right now, like all the memories are fond because we had such a close bond, and I try and be like him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I see that you're married.
I am,
and
yeah.
It was so funny. I went on your page. We were looking for pictures for the promotional post, and it was hard to find one of just you.
Yeah.
Because I noticed that your wife is constantly with you.
Yeah.
How much of an influence has she been on your life?
Yeah.
I'm very good at energy, right? You could tell when things, they're faking, they're playing, but no, like to see that, it was pretty dope. So how much of an influence, how much of an impact has she had on not just your career, but since you've been running? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I say just on me in general, right? I'm more of an analytical person, very like organized type A personality. Yeah. And a lot of that is kind of driven by the military, right? When you're from the time you're 18 until 30, you're in the military. You have a regimental way of thinking a little bit, Yeah. And she's the opposite of that. So she's the creative one. She's the one who is always there to be the angel on my shoulder, right? That's awesome. To say, hey, look, you're getting way too down this rabbit hole of work, or you really need to get some balance back here. And she's just an amazing. Not just wife, but best friend. I love her to death. And the fact that, we met in Washington, D.C. So she was living and working in Washington, D.C. when I first met her. And I happened to be up from Virginia, where I was stationed for a Navy trip up to the Washington area. And we met when I was up there. And 2 months later, I left on deployment. But we stayed in touch on deployment. And that, I think, actually strengthened our bond, strengthened our relationship. We learned a lot about relationships. So I came home. We got engaged a couple months later. And she moved down to Virginia. And then we got married a couple years later. And then literally 3 months after the wedding, I went on deployment again. And we endured 6 months of separation
How
again.
was that? How was it for you? Meeting the love of your life, having to leave so rapidly and then leave again.
It sucks. It's not enjoyable, but like I said, you learn a lot about relationships, a lot about the give and take, a lot about what it really means to devote yourself to someone entirely. Because it's, a lot of things can get papered over when you're in touch with someone all the time, face to face, right? But when your only contact is through an iPhone that you get to talk once a week, when you have internet, you really need a strong relationship. And I can't say enough good
I always
things.
say that communication is the foundation to any relationship, right?
Absolutely.
So that kind of thrusts you right into creating that foundation of just having that raw communication without all the extra gooey stuff that could sometimes mix things up, right?
Not only that, we oftentimes didn't even have time to
Wow.
so like you just have to get right in, right into it. But yeah, she is the foundation of everything for me. And obviously the campaign and work and all of the things you go through as a married couple, can be difficult at times. But
Sure.
When you have good communication and when your relationship rests upon really solid values and fundamentals, you can get through anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Getting into some of the tougher questions, some of the meat and potatoes of the interview.
Let's do it. Yeah.
What brings you to Pennsylvania? What brought you to PA?
Yeah, so my family ancestrally is actually from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So they're from central Pennsylvania, Elk County, small town called Johnsonburg. There's a paper mill there. So
Okay.
back in the 1800s, some of my family moved there, and then so I had some family come here in the early 1900s. They moved to Johnsonburg. The family relocated from Johnsonburg up to Buffalo to work in the steel mill that was in Buffalo. But we always had ties back to Pennsylvania because we have family still in Pennsylvania. And then my wife is from the area here. So she's from just over the state line into Delaware, but her aunt used to live in Chadds Ford. She used to work for business development for a company here in Delaware County. So she knows Delaware County well, has local ties. And when I decided to get out of the Navy, we wanted a place to live, and being close to family, obviously the importance of family is key. And we wanted to be close, and my family's kind of spread out all over the country at this point. Her family's all still right here. And, Delaware County was home. And I have to say it reminds me a lot of where I'm from, up in Buffalo. Just people who work really hard, are proud of where they're from. There's not a lot of pretension, not a lot of hiding who you are. You wear Delco on your sleeve proudly, and I love that. That speaks to me. And I'm not from Delco, but this is the first place in my life that I've ever actually been able to choose where I live.
Wow.
So that means a lot to me.
What do you know about the community here in Chester?
Where do I begin? I started to learn about Chester through Chester City Sweeps. I just wanted to start getting involved in the community, moving here, not being in the military anymore, starting to work a corporate job. It became really apparent to me quickly that I was like missing something that I used to have, right? A higher purpose, right? So I started to look for organizations to get involved in. I got really involved with the Delaware County Veterans Memorial Association. The Veterans Memorial is in Newtown Square, where I live. They do a lot of awesome events for veterans. I joined the VFW. I started to look for civic organizations, and I found Chester City Sweeps.
Awesome.
Which you guys are well familiar with here at this radio station.
Yes.
So I started to just get involved to figure out, hey, look, how can I meet people from different parts of the county? And once I started to get involved here in Chester, I started to research, the history of Chester, because I think it's really interesting. Where I come from in Buffalo, or where I was born in Buffalo, we used to be a big manufacturing town, steel, cars, things like that. All those jobs left in the 1970s and 1980s. Plants shuttered, they left, and it really did a lot of damage to the city. And the more I did some research, the more I understood that Chester had a similar story arc. And I'm really passionate about the places where I live. I'm passionate about trying to make communities better. So Chester really fascinated me, and I wanted to learn more. So I've sought out relationships here in Chester. Obviously, I know Pierre. I know a lot of folks here now, and I've built close friendships that I'm really proud of, and I'm always trying to learn more.
Before I ask the next question, I want to just say that when you came in, and it was so funny. I interviewed Carol Kazim, who has my vote. She's somebody who I support, who I love. She's someone from our community who we get to see, and she spoke very highly of you. Vice versa, you came in, and I think it's important to point that out, is because I don't want us to get caught up in Republican or Democrat. Right? Is that the party? Yes. I want our people to see the person. It's important that we see a Democrat, someone who's a part of our community like Carol Kazim that's active, to be able to speak highly of you. And it's important for us to see when someone like you, Dave, to come in, from that opposite side to say, no, Carol is awesome. She, we agree on a lot of the same things. And that was important for me as a voter, to see that, to feel that, to say, hey, it doesn't matter about the Democrat and the Republican as much as it matters about what we're trying to do, the goal that we're trying to accomplish. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, just on that piece real quick, I mean, Carol obviously is heavily involved with Chester City Sweeps. That's how we met. And she works hard for her community, and she understands that I think that the best way to induce change in a community and to be and to improve things is at the lowest level possible, through people who represent the community, taking charge and being empowered. And we'll go into this, but I mean, that's my philosophical view of why I tend to be on the Republican side, because I like that, view of change. So yeah, I really respect all that Carol has done, and that's funny that we both mentioned that without knowledge of that of each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just being honest, right? We know that politics can be dirty. No one gets to play in dirt without being dirty. Mm-hmm. Can the people count on you to dust that dirt off and to continue to lead and fight for our country the same way you did when you were in the Navy?
Absolutely. I could tell you one of the things that we focus on most at the Naval Academy is the honor concept, the honor code, right? Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Integrity is what you do when no one's looking.
Absolutely.
When you lead people in a combat zone, if you don't have integrity, people see through it in 5 seconds. And most of my life was spent, like I said, in a leadership laboratory, whether it be the Naval Academy or in the Navy, finding out who I am as a person and strengthening character. Because character, values, you hone it through repetition. You have to put yourself out there. You have to put yourself in situations where you're constantly testing yourself. And when you succeed, that creates a foundation for you to rest upon every time. And at the end of the day, success in politics, success in any walk of life depends upon being relentless. It depends upon you having the solid moral compass to do what's right. And I think you have to take a holistic look at someone's record. What have they done in their life? What do they say, and then what do they do? And I think if I want folks to look at what we've been doing on social media. Reach out to us, ask us questions. I'm an open book. That's why I'm here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Most people running for office would not consent to sit down to
to
an open-ended live interview for however long we want to stay here. Which, by the way, you've got me all day. So lucky you. No, just kidding. But so I would just say you have to holistically evaluate the person, and I am who I am. I do what I say, and I promise I'm going to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What are 3 main changes you would like to see in our community, and what is your plan to implement them?
So I've knocked like tens of thousands of doors by now. We've taken kind of a different view on campaigning. Nowadays, campaigns cost millions of dollars. Most campaigns, they'll flood the airwaves with commercials, all these sorts of things. That's just not the tack we've taken. I go right to people.
And it's more intimate that way.
Absolutely. There's no substitute for it.
Yeah,
right? There's no substitute for it.
It's nothing like someone inviting you into their home and saying, hey, do you want some water? Do you want something to drink? And being able to sit there and talk to a family. It's much more intimate that way.
And the biggest complaint I hear is families not being able to just afford the necessities of life, whether it be housing, whether it be food. I mean, my wife loves Honey Nut Cheerios, and we were watching a show the other night just to decompress, like 11 p.m. And she's like, I'm really hungry. Can you go get Honey Nut Cheerios? I'm like, you have to be kidding me. You want me to go out and get? So I go out to buy Honey Nut Cheerios. A box of Honey Nut Cheerios at Acme was almost $7.
Wow.
Think about that for a second. $7 for cereal.
For cereal.
Right? So
something that most of our children in America grow up on.
Right?
It's our go-to.
It's unbelievable. So you look at what's been going on with inflation and getting the cost of living under control. It's a multifaceted problem. But trying to bring down inflation through things like, making sure we're being a little bit more wisely of how we're creating and spending trillions of dollars, right? That's really important. So bringing some strategy back to Congress of getting spending under control and making sure that we're not just making conditions worse for people. That's really important. But locally, I think allowing people to stand on their own with dignity, to have good paying jobs, things like that. It starts with bringing the kind of employment that I talked about earlier with you back to Delaware County.
Absolutely.
Productivity enhancing employment where you can get a job and you continuously improve your skills throughout life without the need to go to college and pay $150,000, right?
Yep.
Think about what Sun Shipyard and Dry Dock used to do for Chester. Employed 30,000 people, employed basically the whole city. You didn't have to go to college, right?
Yeah.
And again, folks could raise families with 3, 4, 5 kids on a skilled machinist job.
And it's important that you say that. John Austin just brought it to our attention last night when I interviewed him on my show, that only a third of Americans actually go to college.
Absolutely.
What are we doing to help the rest of us get through that college might not be something? Hey, I want to be a mechanic. I want to do brakes. Okay, go perfect that.
Absolutely.
And be great at that.
Absolutely. So finding ways to bring funding into our district to revitalize manufacturing, onshore manufacturing, back here, specifically in Chester, I think we can do a lot. Forging relationships, and I've already forged a lot of them with folks here in the community who own small businesses. Understanding, hey, look, in Washington, I'm going to be able to get these funds. I'm going to be able to get access to these grant programs. What's going on in Chester, and how can I be an advocate for you? One thing I don't like is when politicians come home from Washington with solutions and say, hey guys, solved their problem for you. You should be happy because this is what you need. That's not your job. Your job is to be in the community, figure out what the people need, and go to Washington and get it done. It's not
Absolutely.
the other way around, right? So jobs and employment that allows people to stand on their own with dignity, number one for me. Number two, you already alluded to, education. I've really tried to educate myself about the education system federally in Delaware County and specifically in Chester. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do.
First step to correcting a problem is us first admitting that there is one. So
undoubtedly,
it's great to hear you admit that we know that this is an issue.
We have schools in Chester who don't have shades on windows.
We have schools in Chester that didn't have air conditioning.
That was my next thing,
yeah.
Right? We're talking about basic infrastructural improvements. How can kids cannot pay attention in school. Kids are not going to retain.
Shout out to Toby Farms. I'll be there Monday morning.
There you go.
Introducing the show. We'll be introducing, welcoming the kids on their first day of school, 8 o'clock in the morning.
That's awesome. On education, we have a long way to go. I think there's multiple paths we need to explore. I think giving parents options of where they send their kids is really important in the context of, if parents have their kids stuck in a failing school, yes, we have to fix those failing schools, but it takes years oftentimes to fully correct these failures. Mm-hmm. In the interim, I think we have to give parents an option to say, hey, look, for example, if you have a child who has special needs, but you only have one option and that school doesn't have what what that school needs to take care of that child. That parent needs an option to get that child into a different school to make sure that they get caught up, especially after COVID, because you remember our schools were closed for a year or more.
You bringing that up, it really touches home for me. One of the things that I always point out is that as an educator, we haven't even felt the effects of us taking our children out of school. We haven't felt it yet. We haven't even been able to deal with it because we don't know. We won't know until those kids that were in 6th grade are in 9th.
Right.
Those kids that were in 9th grade are graduating or not graduating.
In their years behind.
In their years behind.
To put it in perspective for you.
That's scary.
Philadelphia schools got $3 billion, that's billion with a B.
Wow.
In extra funding during COVID. Those schools were still closed longer than any other in the state. Explain that to me.
Wow.
This problem, and we knew, by the way, early, that keeping schools closed as long as we did was going to be a problem. And we were one of the only countries in the world to do it. Europe didn't do it. Sweden didn't do it. France didn't do it. The UK didn't do it because they understood that schools are where a lot of kids go for food. Schools are where a lot of kids have to go for other reasons than just learning, what they're supposed to learn that day in math class, right? There's a lot of development that happens in school that's not just academic.
Absolutely.
And the fact that even in the face of evidence that we were doing irreparable harm to children, that people didn't speak up, is something that as you can tell right now, I get animated about.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these folks who stayed silent are now going to take up the mantle of education again in election season.
Absolutely.
Oh, I want to increase funding. I want to do this. I want to do that. Well, that might be true, but where were you when you were in office and you could have used it as a bully pulpit to advocate for what's right, backed by the evidence?
Yeah. It's so funny because, I know that you're from two different parties, but I just can't help it. Like, Carl had brought it up. She said, that's where she got her change from. It was a counselor in school that helped her out. So hearing you say that again is, it's important because it is. It's a place where a lot of our kids get to eat, right? It's a place where a lot of our kids get away from the abusive parent or, the abusive sibling. Mm-hmm. It's a safe haven. It's a place where we also get educated. Education is paramount. It's the greatest power that any human being can possess. Our teachers don't get enough credit for all the hard work that they do. You mentioned it in the very beginning before the show started how, that's just another act of service. We have to support our teachers more. We have to support our school counselors more, coming into that. So it's just great to hear you speak on these points. Yeah,
and it's going to have to come down to people willing to accept change, right? The answer is not, and in the context of education, and I know we have to move on, so I won't dive too far down the rabbit hole, but like, for example, the answer is not 100% private school. The answer is not 100% public. The answer is not 100% charter. We need a mix, right? And there are things we need to do in each of those buckets to make sure that we're, yes, we have to make sure public schools that are underfunded are funded so our kids have air conditioning and basic needs that it's imperative they have. But at the same time, charter schools are a good option for some folks. Charter schools are a good option for parents who feel like my kid is not getting this, the service they need in a public school. It's not that they don't want to fund the public school. It's not that they don't, want to fix the public school, but I can't have my child delayed for 5 more years. I need to change right now. Like I need to get him out of school. That's why charters can be a good option for people. And then, same with private schools, but the bottom line is, we have to break this all or nothing thinking where you have to be 100% for one thing or 100% of the other when no human being really thinks that way in real life. It just happens, when you somehow become a politician and you get on CNN, you like, right, you have to be 100% one thing, 100% all the other when 99% of people don't think like that.
At all.
And we need leaders to think like real people, not like politicians.
Absolutely.
So,
what are some of the biggest things that you had to overcome in life, period?
Well, growing up with a single mom, my mom worked really hard to provide for us, and I never really felt like I went without. But I think that was because my mom did the best job she possibly could of doing the work that normally two parents would do. But I know there were days, and you know, I used to hear her crying at night sometimes, and I'm sure she was crying because she was literally on the breaking point. Yeah. You know, I don't know, whether it be financially, emotionally, stress wise. So living up, I sort of had this intrinsic desire to like live up to a high standard for myself, because I knew what my family put themselves through to give me the best shot possible, right?
Absolutely.
So I sort of put a lot of pressure on myself to say, hey, look, you know, if you get an opportunity, you can't screw this up, because your mom literally moved heaven and earth to give you opportunities that, you know, I don't know if I would have had if I didn't have a superhero for a mom, right? So, you know, that was one. You know, in the military, you have to overcome a lot of there's fear, there's stress, there's you know, serious challenges when it comes to balancing your personal life, balancing your family with the higher call of duty. Yeah. And my grandpa was, again, going back to him, you know, his piece of advice that he gave me that I really took with me was, you know, live life slowly. Yeah. And every time I would get really stressed out, or I'd feel as though I was getting this obstacle, or there was this burden I couldn't shake, you know, I would call him, take a deep breath, and he kind of talked me through it in the way that counselors do, you know.
So that's actually going to be one of my questions. Yeah. What's your favorite quote? I'll share mine with you. It comes from Nelson Mandela. Okay. I shared a little bit of my background. So, you know, Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, came home, became the president of South Africa. The quote is, there's no passion to be found in playing small and settling for a life less than the one you're capable of living. What's your quote? What's the one thing, you know, whether it was in the military, in the Navy, you know, in life period, what's the one thing that you always chanted to yourself to get you through?
So it's a Winston Churchill quote. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah.
How much has your Navy experience and being a leader and being a part of such an elite team, how much has that transferred into your ability to be a congressman?
So I think it's a cornerstone of again, the way I view service, the way I view leadership. And to me, you know, being a politician is not anything other than just being a leader in a different form, right? You're just an advocate who works for a lot of people. You know, I had a commanding officer who, this is another good quote, that the higher you rise, the more people you work for. Right?
Wow.
Right. The thought is, okay, the commanding officer commands everyone. That's true, right? You know, rank has great authority, but rank also has immense responsibility. I think people in Congress have forgotten that one. But you know, being able to communicate to a wide swath of people who might not always agree, but you had to get them on board. That's something I had to do in the military all the time. Yeah. You know, as a 23-year-old lieutenant junior grade, right, junior officer, I'd be briefing 2-star, 3-star generals and admirals about the plan, you know, we needed to do. And the only way I could convince them was by providing the merits of my case, communicating well, and using, you know, sort of peer leadership to get all of the folks around me to agree on a course of action. In the Navy, I had to think strategically, right? You always have to think 3 or 4 steps ahead. So, you know, in the military, we do something called a course of action development. And when you develop COAs, as we call them, course of development or courses of action, you would develop branch plans, which you would have to do, okay, if you make assumptions on your course of action and those assumptions turn out to not be true, you can no longer go down this path, you have to develop a branch plan. So, you know, if I assume A, but if not A, then B has to happen, right?
Yeah.
So you branch plan, right? So thinking strategically, again, that's something that it doesn't seem like we do very often in Congress. It's always very short-term thinking in response to immediate things going on. We need a plan. We need a plan developed, and we have to execute on that plan over time to truly achieve great things, right?
Absolutely.
So, those are two really good lessons I learned, and then just to put it viscerally, I disarm bombs.
Yeah.
Okay, I disarm bombs. I can tell you right now, leaders shouldn't be turning up the temperature. They shouldn't be letting bombs go off for narrow aims. It's always much harder to defuse the bomb than to let it go off. And I diffuse bombs with every color, every creed, every ethnicity, every race. I learned how to get the mission done and to focus on the things that really matter, and that's what I'm bringing to Congress.
That's awesome. What are your takes on the mental health pandemic in our community? I talk about it. I talk about mental health every week on my show. It's one. I also co-host a show called Out in the Open with Dr. Ja. That's officially now a part of CMPRadio.net. And one of the things that we agree on is that it's like a silent pandemic. Nobody's talking about it, right? It's like the silent killer in our community, which is mental health. The pandemic didn't help us out, right? Because nobody was prepared to stay in the house. The kids weren't prepared to stay home from school. Nobody was prepared for that. And it also, it played a major part in our mental stability today.
Absolutely.
What are some of your goals to raise awareness for mental health?
Well, as a veteran, we as a community have a lot of mental health challenges, as you know. I mean, in many ways, the veteran community coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan was really the public's first introduction to things like post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
And looking at it not from a taboo standpoint, right? As something you don't talk about, right? But as something you openly embrace and say, listen, I'm having these issues and I need resources to help solve them. So the VA has taken, we still have a long way to go, by the way, but I mean, we've taken strides to get there in the veteran community, and that's been a model and can be a model as far as just the social acceptance of the need to talk about mental health. So for me, in Congress, obviously prioritizing funding for more mental health experts, funding, not only the manpower, but even now certain technologies we have to develop when someone is showing physiological signs of, potentially developing a mental health condition. So again, in the military, prior to deployment, we would have to take a brain scan. And then after deployment, we'd take a brain scan. And they could tell, hey, look, you were around, X number of explosions on deployment. We scanned your brain before, we scanned your brain after. Here's the injuries you had. So you're aware of what went on, so you can seek treatment, if you need it, right? It's things like this, that I think are really important. Although that particular case doesn't apply to everyone, but it's just one example.
Is there any way that we can get a mental health scan to go with a physical? Like, you go get a physical, mental health should be a part of that.
I could not agree more. Absolutely. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
See, this is why people running for office should talk to people, because they have great ideas.
Absolutely.
I like that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Mass incarceration, and not just from the people committing crimes and being incarcerated, or people not committing crimes and being incarcerated. Just the system as a whole. You got the child support system. I've been a part of that myself, and it's kind of ran crazy. It's not ran like your normal court system should be ran, and it should be ran that way, but they kind of do their own thing. And then you have the regular court system, they do their own thing. How do we prevent mass incarceration? What are some of the things that you plan to implement to slow that down, as well as what are we doing for reentry? So
I think, there's there's a lot of pieces to this.
Absolutely.
I think
it's a big question. So you can take your time, break it apart.
So let's talk about police first, okay?
All right.
So I think it's really important to make sure police are funded. I'll say that. I think it's important to fund other things like mental health. I think it's important to fund other things like youth intervention programs and violence off-ramp programs, which I would like to talk about later, so don't let me forget.
Absolutely.
But we have to fund the police, because with police funding comes enhanced training, comes enhanced equipment, and ways to make sure that cops know how to do things like de-escalate or know how to identify someone who might be having a mental health episode, right? So increasing the funding is really important, because if you train police better, they're going to be able to better handle situations and potentially de-escalate, so they don't end up in the person getting arrested, or they don't escalate and then a fight ensues or a shootout ensues, and then again we're dealing with something that probably didn't have to get to that point. Funding community policing efforts so cops can be present in communities. You know, I just came from Norristown.
You were telling me
prior to the interview, and I was at a school supply event. We brought notebooks and pencils and some donations for some of the kids going back to school, and they had policemen there distributing the school supplies to the kids. And then a police officer gave a little safety briefing for kids. So he said, "Hey, how many kids ride the school bus?" All hands go up. So here's what you should do on the school bus. Don't run up and down on the aisles. Sit down, wear your seatbelt, this sort of thing, right? And then afterwards, all the kids came up, shook the cop's hand. These are the kind of things we should be funding, right? These are the kind of things
that we need to see
in
our community to bridge that gap.
Exactly. Community policing. Look, good policing, 100% key. Everyone agrees on that, right? And the more police are present in communities and have a good working relationship with people in the community, the better it's going to be, and the more we prevent the kind of situation you're talking about.
We don't have the beat cop anymore.
Exactly.
We don't have the cop that everybody knows, your mom knows,
right.
He's welcome in the neighborhood.
Right.
I don't even see the horses anymore.
And it's funny because, I spent a lot of time talking to law enforcement. My uncle was, until recently, a federal law enforcement officer, and cops want to do the right thing. They understand these challenges too, right? So it's about finding the ways to get the funding that's needed to build the relationships that are needed to continue to move the ball down the field. So that's one. Number two, mental health, youth intervention programs, things like that, right? Deterrence has to be a part, right? So, if you carry a gun or you do it that you're not supposed to have, or you fire the gun or you shoot someone or you commit violence, right, you should go to jail. But at the same time, you should have intervention programs to try and nip that in the bud before it happens.
Absolutely.
Things can be as simple as youth baseball, right? Norristown hasn't had a youth baseball league in 8 years. You want to know why? Because their field is close to the river and it floods. Think about how easy that problem would be to fix.
Wow.
Just get a new field.
We have one here that floods. So
right
on Curlin.
Simple, right? You provide options for kids to play youth sports, keep kids busy in the summer, channel their energies in a positive direction. You're developing, all the right things you want to see in youth. You're connecting them with coaches, community leaders, mentors, people that keep kids out of trouble.
Absolutely. People
that can be good resources for family members, right? A single mom brings her kid to baseball. Thank God I get to take a break, right? And she gets to, the coach can help her and all these sorts of things, right? It's a virtuous circle. So that's a whole second piece to it.
That's the village.
Right? And then the third piece would be reentry, right? You pay your time. You should have a clean slate afterwards.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I know you're going to talk about this, but so I'll just say, making sure that we have real employment opportunities to make sure that people, like you said, aren't penalized twice, right?
Yeah.
If you do your time and you pay your debt to society, you shouldn't be barred from getting a job. Yeah. Right?
You shouldn't be barred from it being brought up. You shouldn't be barred from not having your rights restored. It's literally, it's disheartening, right? It's, where is the trust on the other end? I trusted, I committed a crime. I did the time. The judge gave me a specific amount of time that he felt that was appropriate for the crime committed. I did that time. I did the programs, the reentry. To come home and have to go through, being on parole and say, oh, now I have to fight to get my rights restored. I'm no longer an American because I did my time and I served my community. I served my time. So now I had to come home and I had to refight again to just be a regular citizen. To me, that just isn't fair. I always say it's like you're serving two sentences. You do a 5 to 10, you do the 10 years, you're off parole, and now I have to fight again.
I would say I think we need to do a better job ensuring that we're actually preparing people to reenter society as well, because that would allay the concerns of an employer who said, well, I don't want to hire this person because in the past, maybe I had bad experiences or, X and X happened. Well, if you're doing a better job of while people are leaving the incarceration system, of actually preparing them, if they have mental health issues, if they had, if you're helping prepare those people, you're not only helping them, but you're also giving peace of mind to people on the other end as well. So again, it's a virtuous circle, right? By taking this seriously.
And maybe it's something as simple as, because I don't hear people talk about it that much, the federal bonding program, which is a program that's set up that you could be federally bonded. It's like an insurance company on yourself. So a job that hires you, you can say, hey, I'm federally bonded. So what that means is that, hey, if I steal anything, if I do anything wrong, if I mess up your business, I have an assurance policy on myself, and this says that if I do any of that, you'll be compensated. How do, maybe it's something as simple as that, coming out of prison, that everybody should come home federally bonded.
And I think just to connect this to a larger point, I speak a lot about family. The key to families forming and staying together is, oftentimes downstream of economics, i.e. the family needs an actual shot of being able to survive as a family unit.
Absolutely.
Right? So I always think to myself, how can we help, form families, keep them together? And that's one way, right? If folks don't have a real shot of getting a job, and keeping the job.
And it's disheartening.
Right.
It's disheartening.
Right.
So again, I'm humbled and I'm honored to hear you talk about it, because again, the first step to correcting any problem is admitting that you have one. We can't correct nothing that we can't admit that's there. We have to admit that this is an issue. For the young people, for the young voters, the young men and women that's watching, in your words, can you tell us the difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party?
Yes. So I would say, to me, it's philosophical, right? How do you approach solving problems? For me, as a Republican, and as someone who's a little more conservative, it's how do we solve problems at the lowest level, right? Mm-hmm. So not the federal government telling everyone else to do, but how do we reverse it and say, let's go to the people who are closest to the problem, and how do we empower them, to solve the problem themselves? Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes I think centrally directed solutions the people who make them have really good intentions, but it's really easy for a giant organization with a budget of trillions that governs a country of 330 million people.
Again, that dirt.
Okay.
Right?
It is impossible for someone who is a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C., who spent most of their life in the D.C. suburbs, to truly understand what a working family in Chester actually faces on a daily basis. Okay? So to me, it's about where does change start? And then also, what kind of change is best, right? Do you want to go, do you try and make profound, massive, revolutionary change at once, which is going to, upset a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, mm-hmm. largely because human beings are creatures of habit, right? We get used to the way things were, right? So I'd say the Democratic Party really wants to, again, enact change more at once and at the federal level, whereas, I think the Republican Party wants to say, hey, look, we're not standing at thwart of change. We understand there needs to be change, but the change should be a little bit more organic and done, again, at a lower level, because change that happens at the lower levels, oftentimes naturally and driven by the people closest to the problem, is the kind of change that sticks. Whereas change that, gets told to you from afar, oftentimes it doesn't stick. And history is full of examples of that happening.
And you only see it, it's like a flash, and
Right.
then it's gone.
Right.
What is the difference, or what do you plan to do differently than the congressmen that we have in office now?
So I think the number one thing is be present.
Yes.
Be present. So we live about 2 hours from Washington, D.C., here in PA5. I don't make enough money to buy a house in Washington, D.C. I don't have enough money to buy a house in Washington, D.C. So when I'm in Congress, I'm going to have to be back in my district here with everyone watching right now, because I literally can't afford to buy a place in Washington. So being home in the district and not staying in Washington when Congress is in session, for example, that's one easy way that I will be in the district listening, learning, prioritizing constituent services, for example. Making sure that we're doing more town hall meetings, maybe having office hours on a weekend when a lot of Congress people don't do office hours on weekends, coming up with new ways to be more timely in communication with constituents. But win
or lose, please don't lose that.
Absolutely.
We need more men. We need more community leaders to continue that journey. So win or lose, and thank you so much. But I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we talked before the show, and I know how you feel. So
yeah, I mean, we just really it's a matter of relentlessness. When you get there, you can't get comfortable. And again, I've had the life experience, and I had the values to where I can never be comfortable, right? And that's good, because when you are in a position which is endowed with massive amounts of trust, and upon which the lives of people literally sometimes hang, you can't be comfortable. You always have to be feeling the pressure of being at that community event, having that town hall, prioritizing constituent services, and then, like I said, focusing on the kitchen table issues. That's another thing. I have to say my opponent has been focused on a lot, but she hasn't been focused on the issues that really matter most to the voters that I've talked to. I'm talking price of essentials. I'm talking price of energy. I'm talking crime in our communities, which we can dive into a little bit more if you'd like. But it's the basic issues which affect everyone, Republican or Democrat. Those are the issues that I want to focus on most.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you want people to remember about Dave leaving here?
Look, I'm a Republican. Everyone might not agree with everything that I stand for, but no matter what party you're in, or no matter what persuasion you have politically or ideologically, you will 100% get access to me. You will 100% get a fair hearing from me. You will 100% have an open mind from me. And I'm in this not because I want to be a career politician. Frankly, becoming a politician never even entered the realm of possibility for me growing up as a single, with a single mom. I couldn't even imagine it, right? But I'm not a politician. I'm a naval officer. I'm a leader. I'm a guy who just wants to do right by the community. And we can't continue to do things the same old way. We can't be governed by the same ideology, the same pedagogies, right? It's time to do something different and build a new movement, not just here in Chester, but here in PA5 in Pennsylvania and in the country. And as someone, again, who I have my beliefs, I have the way that I want to solve problems, but the only way we're really going to solve our biggest problems and confront our challenges is by doing something different, and I think I represent that difference.
I just want to go on the record and say that coming in, one, I'm a hugger, right?
Yeah.
But it's also one of the ways that you can kind of tell. I pick up on energy. I want to thank you for bringing that pure energy. We hugged immediately. First time meeting
I'm a hugger
each other.
too, so it's all
first
good.
time meeting
Yeah.
each other, and it was
Yeah.
just pure. I picked up on that. Thank you so much for your honesty, your transparency. It's not easy doing a live interview, right? You don't know the questions.
Yeah.
We don't. It's live. It's right here. People are watching right now. Thank you so much for coming out and allowing us to see Dave Galluch, right? And get to know you on such an intimate level. This was amazing for me, being a black kid from Chester that came from a rough background, to be able to sit down and have these conversations, to interview the likes of you and Carl Kazim and Derek Billups, and it's amazing, all the business owners and entrepreneurs that I have interviewed on my show thus far. Thank all of you. To all of my viewers, know that he's the real deal. The energy is real. I'm not here. I don't want to persuade you, but thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Listen, I love doing this. We can come back as many times as we want, but listen, I'm here to work for you guys. And I'm here to get the mission done, and I love Chester, I love PA5, and the best is yet to come, man. Thanks.
Thank you. I wish you the best.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.